Hello there, this is Critical from Critical Media, just taking a look at the 2023 release of Batman Under the Red Hood, the Deluxe Edition, mainly spearheaded by Judd Winick with the main series art from Doug Mahnke, Tom Nguyen, Alex Sinclair, and the additional stories from Shane Davis and Justin Haun. And what we usually do at this channel is give you an idea of what to expect if you ever come across these books in the wild. So we go over the exterior, some bonus material, art and plot points, and then a brief review at the end. Now this book, man, I tell you, way back in the day when I got the trade, I'm sure some of you guys have the same one here. I remember even thinking back then, man, I wish they made this a hardcover. For those of you returning to the channel, you may notice I have a certain affinity for hardcovers. Nothing wrong with trades, it's just I prefer a bit more integrity in the release. But anywho, in terms of this release, though, again, I guess following with that very same motif, we have this very striking design from Jacques, pretty much a nice little nod to Jim Apato's efforts there on Death in the Family. After all, there's a heavy connection to it. And I do appreciate how the whole book has this, black, red, and white motif. I get it. It's pretty much an automatic win when you match those colors together. But, man, it doesn't hurt that it's here, too, just the same. And more art from Jacques on the back here. I do appreciate that they went off with the more than just the standard fare there. Now, underneath the dust jacket, we have more of a Doug Mahnke kind of wraparound image. So it is basically one of the battle sequences from earlier in the book. I do appreciate the lettering on the side. I don't know why, but it just gives off notes of their releases of, what's it called, No Man's Land. It just kind of looks similar. Well, that's what I mean by it's kind of a wraparound image of their fight. Not bad. Now, onto bonus material here. Surprisingly, not too much, but honestly, I'm not going to really tax this book for that, considering what this book included. So, at least in terms of bonus material, yeah, we just have this particular image here. Pretty decent, I gotta admit. I always like that water brush style sometimes when folks use it. Your typical fare with the just sketch work. Almost looks like it's straight out of, Batman the Animated Series, or the whole Timverse. But then, of course, you have the Matt Wagner covers here. Awesome. I've been reading a lot of Grendel lately, so it's almost like a perfect little match here. But yeah, your typical fare with, plot designs, sketch work. It's actually pretty in-depth in that sense, so maybe I shouldn't be too much of a griper on those. But you see what I mean. It's not too dense. It's decent enough. Oh, the animated film. I guess we'll talk about that near the end of this video. Now, in terms of at least, art and plot points, y'all folks maybe are already aware of this story. It does come off the heels of Batman Hush. And if for those who read Batman Hush, there was a certain scene in it, the cemetery fight, where you're introduced to an idea that, whoa, Jason Todd is back. Or there's this additional character. And this pretty much does lend itself on that idea. And the book kind of opens with this media res quality, where it's telling basically like a midpoint in the story. So it's already their battle on the rooftops. Nice little display of kinetics. And you're already getting the impression that this enemy doesn't even care who Batman is under the mask. So obviously that's going to be a telling point here. But then the book, as I mentioned, it kind of goes right back to the beginning, that media res quality, weeks prior. And it pretty much leads all the events up to this point. But man, I tell you, Matt Wagner, man, these covers were so damn good. Like this one's, for some reason, always was striking. I guess because we rarely get a bit of Black Mask in it. And maybe, just to give you an idea of the world at this point. Yeah, Black Mask is pretty much the crime boss of Gotham. He's pretty much running out of pose because a lot of the rogues are kind of out of commission or just not really as into Gotham and their plots and whatnot. But as I mentioned, for those of you who may have either read the story or maybe even watched the film, you'll find that it's a pretty decent and familiar setting here. But the same idea here where, yes, again, there's this nice little excuse for Batman and Nightwing to be back together again. Just to deal with the whole Amazo situation. Awesome. Just a reminder of how Batman can deal with enemies when he has a strong partner by his side. Kind of a nice little lead into the story, so to speak. decent in that respect. But man, I gotta say, even though I'm not the biggest Doug Mahnke fan, like his art is very serviceable, but it's very flat in my opinion. Not a bad thing. It's just that it's not really the focus here. This is where I gotta admit, Judd Winick is a king of crafting a great story and considering many different angles at the time. But awesome kinetics throughout nonetheless. I'm not gonna, chastise what's his name, Doug Mahnke over the art. But yeah, there's this player who just keeps interfering with whatever scenario Batman's dealing with. Very similar to the way Hush used to. But I guess a bit more direct and a bit more flamboyant than the way Hush was doing it. So it's definitely raised Batman's curiosity, so to speak. But I appreciate how certain low-level characters that you don't typically hear from, they get a little bit more shine in this one. So definitely appreciate that. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of nods to the whole Death in the Family story. And Jim Aparo, I feel like a lot of his panel design was never really appreciated enough. So I appreciate that Doug Mahnke at least honored him by matching that event, just putting the whole parallel aspect on it. Love that. But very unique nonetheless. But overall, you're going to love this story. I definitely would approve of it, that's for sure. You get a lot more out of it, though, when you read it outright. Some folks will just, rely on the film. And, yeah, like I mentioned, I'm going to save my thoughts on the film in a moment. But you get extra content here, or, the better parts of it, like Onyx, who is like this redeemed enemy turned now vigilante. I love the whole angle with her where she's trying to be like a more, dutiful crime fighter. And here comes this character who's kind of leading her back into the dark side. Awesome. And also I appreciate this character, the new Red Hood's, his overall attitude and the way he's written. It's very on point. I gotta give him a lot of credit here. But man, it's just a super striking story. It has so many different plot points and different turns. Probably one of my favorite moments in this book is this here, where out of nowhere, yes, Captain Nazi and Hyena show up. I'm a Captain Marvel fan. Captain Nazi being one of his major antagonists, or Captain Marvel Jr.'s. So any nod to Captain Marvel I'm going to love. That's why this book always kind of made me smile anytime I came across it. So yeah, a little bit of bias, I ain't going to lie. But yeah, it's still a colorful design here. You get the more unique or flamboyant version of Vertigo over there. Awesome stuff. But nonetheless, for those of you who know how this story plays out, the big moment, the whole showdown with him, Joker, and so forth. But there is a certain page, and it's this one here. For those of you who read the trade, you'll notice something. The trade is missing this final page. It's in every format too. Like if you read it digitally or if you read it via this trade here, you'll notice that page is missing. It just has this image from Jock instead. So you see, it's pretty much the same setup, but hey, it's nice to actually see what the heck these ellipses were leading toward. But at the same time, I'm more of a fan of just grounded storytelling as it is, so I don't need all this parallel universe jazz included. But that's just me. But now, on to why I wasn't really buffing this book too much over the lack of bonus material. What I love about this is, just like with the trade, they included this story, the Shane Davis one, where, yes, it basically explains this method of how he came back, how the character survived the events of Death in the Family. I never really liked the comic book explanation of it, at least the way he came back. I like the aftermath of it, basically this point onward. But I gotta admit, I didn't like the comic book's whole, it's a result of a parallel universe, whatever. Whereas the film admittedly did it better. It already used an in-universe explanation. But nonetheless, at least they also included from the trade the one excerpt from Batman Hush. Yes, for those of us who already have it or, you've come across it. Yeah, it's maybe a little bit of double dipping, but it's pretty well placed, and I don't mind that it's here. Because it's, you might not want to go back to reading that particular book of Hush just to, appetize yourself with this scene. But that's what I mean. The events of Hush, this is the one part of it that kind of led into this book. So it's thankful that it's here. But now comes the part that definitely makes this deluxe worth it. Many years after this release, this was like what, 2003? In 2010, this book comes out, Red Hood, The Lost Days, which is basically a more so, I'd say it's more of like an elaboration of what he was doing during that time period before returning to Gotham. And you get to see a whole history of him and the whole, Demon's Head society. It also fits so well with his character. So much so that I feel like when the New 52 came out, they were really following this more than anything else. Like the whole Red Hood and the Outlaws series that came out from that. I feel like that series lends itself a lot to this particular story. And I love the fact that they included it in this release. Absolutely loved it. Makes it worth the deluxe edition alone. Man, so damn good that they added it. But I guess you're kind of hinting toward my idea of the review part of this book. I'll say this. 100% this is a pickup. Like I mentioned, it's always awesome to have a hardcover. And the fact that they came out with the Death in the Family hardcover a few years ago, it just only seems right that they match up with each other. I will always say the film did it better. The film told this story in a better way than the book did. But the book is definitely no slouch. You definitely get a little bit more nuanced detailing and a few extra stories nonetheless and new dimensions to it. But yeah, I will be 100% honest. The animated film was probably the best DC animated film to date, at least in my opinion. Everybody has their own, but I felt like that was the one that changed everybody's opinion on the DC animated films, and this story was no slouchy either, so definitely pick it up, I would say. But you know what? It's no longer about me at this point. Hopefully you guys got your own opinion about this book, and I wouldn't mind seeing them in the comments down below, as always. Y'all folks take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.